Welcome to this presentation for the 7th International Symposium on Live Subtitling and Accessibility. My name is Pablo Romero-Fresco. I work at Universidade de Vigo, and I'm co-authoring this presentation with Nazaret Fresno from the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. The title is Assessing Live Subtitling Quality Across Languages and Cultures, and we're looking specifically at the work that we have been carrying out with regard to the NER model for the assessment of live subtitles. And more specifically, we're looking at how to mainstream and disseminate, internationalize the model at the same time that it needs to be adapted to the national realities of different countries. The contents of the talk of this presentation are, first of all, we're going to be dealing with soft and hard approaches to live subtitling quality. We're going to be talking about different models of assessment for live subtitling quality, then focusing on the NER model and on these two specific tasks that we have been working on, and which may be seen as slightly contradictory or incompatible. So we'll be looking into how to make them compatible, and finally we'll be looking at the road ahead, at the work that's ahead of us at the moment. So first of all, we have soft and hard approaches to live subtitling quality. Soft approaches are those where some standards are set for good quality. For example, parameters like completeness, accuracy, readability, and synchronicity of the live subtitles. It's normally based on user complaints, so it's a reaction to user complaints. It is helpful, these soft approaches are helpful to raise awareness about the need to improve quality in live subtitling. They normally trigger discussion amongst the different stakeholders, but to our minds, they don't normally lead to an official assessment of the quality of live subtitles. They just remain as kind of recommendations, as has been the case in the US and Australia. Harder approaches are those that decide to adopt metrics. And this has happened with the NER model, for example, in Canada or the UK, where, yes, the focus is on the quality of the subtitles rather than starting from user complaints. It is still helpful, these approaches are still helpful to raise awareness about the need to work on this area and to trigger discussion, but as I said before, it's mostly the difference lies in the fact that these hard approaches require the assessment of quality. So that is a difference with soft approaches. Now, models of assessment, there are several ones. WER is the original one that is still used for automatic speech recognition, variations of which also are like the ACE model, for example, now in the US are being used for ASR, for automatic speech recognition. Then we have Carlo Eugeni's IRA model, which is based on the rendition of idea units. That's being used now also for speech-to-text interpreting. And then the NER model, which is based on a distinction between edition and recognition errors. Edition errors, those that have to do with mostly omitted or changed information, and recognition errors are those that have to do with the way in which the technology interacts with the human, so production errors, if you like. There are degrees of severity of those errors. They could be minor, standard, or serious, depending on how they impact on comprehension. Well, just to go back to that, the NER model basically then is based on meaning and idea units as well, rather than on words. So, with the NER model, we've been working on two different areas. One is the need to internationalize or mainstream the model so that it doesn't stay within academic circles and it reaches stakeholders such as regulators, companies, and users. But on the other hand, we also need, and we have seen that this idea of kind of disseminating the model and internationalizing it also requires that the model works in the different countries depending on how live subtitles are being produced. So that's why we need to adapt it nationally. If we look at the requirements for an assessment model as established in an article that I wrote in 2020, the second part of it, rigorous, the model has to be rigorous in terms of being research informed, valid, reliable and user-focused. But it also has to be transferable, which is where we are at the moment, right? And because it has to be transferable, first it has to be straightforward, which means that this will help the dissemination or mainstreaming of a model amongst different circles, and it also has to be flexible enough to be able to work in different countries that have different live subtitling practices and traditions. So this is what we're working on, and in some cases it's not been easy because there are some somewhat contradictory actions that we need to take. So let's focus on, first of all, how we've tried to internationalize or disseminate the model. First, as part of the ILSA project, we have produced a video lecture that explains the model and gives some examples. So that's proved useful as well for workshops and different types of training. We have partnered up with the technology company Aptech in the US to write a series of blogs that can help us, again, disseminate the model and explain it for people who will access this. Aptech has also come up with an infographic, and the infographic again gives you a glimpse, like a snapshot of what the model is about and the examples in which it can be used. Along with Zoe Moore's, we have produced a flowchart. This is a bit more specific, specialized, a flowchart that helps us take decisions when trying to use the model. So a sort of decision tree, if you like. And Zoe has also developed this and adapted it for the NERLE model, which is the NER for live events, which she has recently produced. Now, these are some of the actions that we have done, or those are some of the actions that we have carried out to be able to spread the model wider in an international kind of context. But we have also had to adapt it to national realities, as I said. In Canada, for example, the CRTC, which is the official regulator, the governmental regulator, has introduced the model in the official legislation on accessibility. So there's a requirement now for all broadcasters to use the model a certain times a month, with a certain sample of programs, so that they can have an official assessment of the quality of the live captions used in those programs. They have also come up with a NER advisory council in the country, where first they have their own NER guidelines, which is the Canadian NER guidelines, different from other NER guidelines. They have certified NER evaluators and a NER evaluator training and certification program. So all that has been set up in Canada for the past years. Interestingly, we have worked on certifying deaf and hard of hearing users for the first time as NER evaluators. So they are the ones who are going to be assessing the quality of live captions using the model. But the fact that they are deaf and hard of hearing has given us an interesting insight into how viewers comprehend subtitles. And in a way, it has proved to change their priorities as well. So most of those deaf and hard of hearing NER evaluators, having gone through the process of NER certification, are now telling us that their main priority when looking at captions is meaning rather than actually words. So that's been very enlightening. The videos explaining all this process have been made accessible through sign language, as you can see there. So this is just for you to look at. It's just a comparison between the European and the Canadian NER. The main point of which is that in the Canadian NER there's no distinction between edition and recognition errors, and this may make it slightly less valid for training, but still could be used for training, and still obviously very valid for assessment. But it's an interesting kind of comparison of how the model can change to adapt to a national reality. And that takes us to the road ahead, what we're working on at the moment. At the moment we're trying to do kind of a similar process that we have done in Canada but in the US, and for that we have been delivering NER workshops to the largest captioning company in the country, Vitac, that does subtitles. They produce subtitles for I think it's 600,000 hours a year of live captions. So we have been training their evaluators to become NER evaluators, so that they can use the model to evaluate the quality of their captions produced by respeaking, or voice writing as they call it there, steno, and automatic speech recognition. And then we've also been training Gallaudet University and the Rochester Institute for Technology so that they can use the model in their research and for the different types of ASR that they are testing at the moment. So this may be a way in to see if the FCC, the governmental regulator in the US, eventually accepts the use of metrics and therefore makes a transition from soft to hard approaches in the US. So this is the work that we are carrying out, and for that work we are partnering up with we are part of the Global Alliance of Speech-to-Text Captioning, with whom we are trying to work on two different things that I will mention at the end of this slide, which are basically to do with certification. But first, let me have a look at some considerations here for the introduction of the NER model in the US. First, we're going to be basing our US NER, or NER US, on the European NER, so making a distinction between edition and recognition errors, because we believe that this is very useful for training, to know whether the errors come from the decision of a human to edit something, edition errors, or from the interaction with the technology, recognition or production errors. We are working with the Global Alliance to try and incorporate voice writers and stenotypists in this process of how to produce, how to make the NER US model, how to adapt it. And we need to look into ASR. Thus our 98% threshold for good captions as per the NER model apply to ASR as well, considering how many minor punctuation errors, for example, those automatic subtitles have. This is some of the issues that we need to consider. So we are aiming, as I said before, to set up an official NER certification issued by maybe the Global Alliance, both for captioners to see if their captions are, let's just say, good enough, and for evaluators so that we can train them to evaluate with the NER model. And the aim, of course, the final aim, is to encourage the FCC to adopt those metrics. So just to finish, we were saying that this idea of mainstreaming, internationalizing the NER model, it's related to the idea of the model being transferable and straightforward, and the fact that we are adapting it to the reality of different countries means that it's also flexible. But sometimes this could be incompatible, as I said before. If we adapt it too much, if we change it too much, are we still talking about the same model? Are we still obtaining comparable results across countries? In order to have some sort of limit or criteria that can ensure that we don't go too far in either direction, and that while we mainstream we still keep the results comparable across countries, we need to focus on the first characteristic here, which is the model still needs to be rigorous, so still needs to be research informed, still needs to be valid, and therefore looking at the actual quality of live captions and what it entails, and it has to be reliable. So this is kind of what we need to always take into account, that transferability could be done, but not to the detriment of the rigor that we're trying to establish. So whenever we have those discussions in Canada and now in the US, we can go as far as we are supposed to go, only insofar as we still keep the model research informed and reliable, in the sense of the results of the application of a NER model in Canada, even if it's the NER in Canada or the Canadian NER, still need to be comparable to those obtained in Europe and soon in the US as well. So this is it for today. Please feel free to email us at p.romero@uvigo.es, or Natharet's Fresno. I can give you her email address, and we'll be very happy to give you all the information that you may need about this and about the work that we are conducting at the moment regarding the NER model. Thank you very much for your attention.